Just this past summer, my younger sister and I went to visit family and friends out of state. My sister at the time was 16 and I'm 18. Just for some reference, my sister and I look very alike, but a lot of the time I get that she looks way older than me, like she's in her 20s. She's got like a good 5 inches on me. Both of us are, admittedly, very loud and obnoxious, especially when we're together. Alright, anyways, we arrive at the local airport, and my parents, of course, freak out and worry, and then send us off. We went to our local airport, which is pretty small in comparison to the size of the city we live in. My sister and I find our gate, and we had at least an hour to wait because our flight kept getting delayed due to an emergency landing our plane had to do for someone on board. Anyway, we were just sitting around, literally off on our own. The airport really isn't big at all. Once you get through security, you make a left where some gates are, or a right where other gates are, and there were a few shops and restaurants in between the gates. We were at the closest gate possible to where all the restaurants and stuff were located, and there had to be like 3 other gates down past us, gates B and C. Obviously, we were at A. So we're sitting alone as our flight really didn't have that many people on it, and we were extremely early, anyways. And there was like 100 plus other seats, and I'm sitting on the floor just charging my phone, watching Netflix, and my sister was on a chair next to me doing the same, and some weird older guy just sits right across from us. Mind you, all the other fucking seats that were around. The dude himself reminded me of the murderer from the movie Lovely Bones, except way skinnier, like oddly skinny. So, me and my sister are just doing small chats in between watching our shows, and we keep hearing announcements about our flight, and we both just keep cracking jokes and make comments like we always do and just mess around. Common for 2 teenage girls, I guess. Almost every single thing we say, this guy laughs at. I mean, I know when we're together we're funny, but he would laugh at things like, "Do you want water?" or "Wow, this has taken a while," like things that aren't even remotely a joke. I, personally, am a very alert person and get paranoid easily. Especially since I read these stories so often, I'm always aware of the situation. So I kept my eye on this dude as he kept watching my sister and I, but mostly my sister. I'm on my phone watching Netflix when all of a sudden my sister texts me and says, "I think this guy is taking pictures of me." I didn't even say anything back as I was a little shocked. I texted back, "Are you sure?" And she said, "Yes." That's when my full crazy sister mode went off. My sister and I are extremely close, and I would give my life for her, and I don't put up with any shit either. And neither does she, as she's very feisty, but I could tell she was really scared. As soon as I looked up to give this guy a piece of my mind, he just got up and left. He looked like he was about to shit a ton of bricks. I turned to my sister, asking her what happened, and she said she was on her phone and looked up to see him with his phone tilted right at her. I said maybe he wasn't trying to take pictures, but she said she could tell just based off of the way he was acting. Like a teenage girl who's trying to secretly take a picture of a cute boy or something like that and isn't being discreet about it at all. After talking to her about it, I was angry. Like, who even are you, taking pictures of a 16-year-old? I got up and walked down the gates in the direction that the guy went in. I shit you not, though, I walked up our section of gates at least like 5 times and he was nowhere. I couldn't find him. We texted our mom and she freaked the fuck out, telling us to get to the ladies that check our tickets and find a security guard, but I just let it go considering the fact that I couldn't even find this guy myself. The weirdest part, besides him taking pictures, was when me and my sister boarded the flight, the man did not. He did not return to our gate and wasn't even on our flight, so he was just sitting right across from us for literally no reason other than to be a weirdo. So, weird picture taker, please don't meet again. And especially don't meet my sister again. This happened to me when I was 4 or 5 years old. I was at a rather large toy store with my dad and sister, who is 2 years older than me, so that I could pick out a birthday present for a friend of mine. My dad and I were looking at the Legos they had available, while my sister was shuffling around, bored out of her mind. At some point, she wandered away. I was looking at the box of a castle set, wishing that it was my birthday coming up, when my sister returned and tugged on my dad's arm. "What is it, sweetheart?" he asked, without looking away from the box he was holding. I think he also wished it was his birthday coming up, too. "There's a man. Oh, never mind, he's gone now." My dad looked at her, putting the box back onto the shelf. "What man?" he asked. "There was a man who asked if I wanted to come see his puppy, and I said that I'd have to ask you first, but I don't know where he went." My dad took the box out of my hands and put it back on the shelf, then took my hand in his and put his other around my sister's shoulders. "Well, let's go find him," my dad exclaimed, and began leading us towards the checkout/exit. Now, like I said, this toy store was rather large, and we were walking very fast. When we got near the checkouts, my sister pointed out a man who was about to leave the store and said, "That's him!" I could see how she recognized him from behind, as he had very long hair. It went halfway down to his back. I remember him having a black winter coat on, which was strange because it was a pretty warm day. We walked even faster until we were at the nearest checkout, and my dad said to us, "Stay here with this nice lady for a second," referring to the cashier. He then ran up behind the man, who was now almost at the door, and threw his hand on his shoulder so hard I could hear it. My dad spun around to face him, then began yelling, "Where's the puppy? Where's the puppy you wanted to show my daughter?" People around started looking over at the commotion, and my dad continued, "You wanted to take my daughter to see your puppy? Where is it? I want to see this puppy too." The man was stammering and stuttering and trying to get away, but my dad had a firm grasp on the guy's shoulder. Turning his head to where we were standing, my dad yelled to my sister, "Is this the guy who asked you to come see his puppy?" My sister silently nodded her head, then looked down at her shoes. I think she thought she was in trouble. I don't blame her, as our dad was yelling pretty loudly. "Is the puppy in your car? Where's your car? Is it over there?" He pointed out the glass door to the parking lot. "Or is that your car? Is that where the puppy is that you wanted to show my 6-year-old daughter?" I remember thinking that if he just let go of the guy, we could maybe go see the puppy. Before I knew it, 3 men in yellow jackets had come. There was a word on their jackets, which I couldn't read at the time, but I now know it said security. My dad let go of the man, and the yellow fellows held him instead. My sister was crying by this point. My dad walked back to us, once again taking my hand in one of his own, and putting the other around my sister's shoulders. He asked the cashier if she had a phone he could use, and she took us to the office. He called our mom to come pick us up, then assured my sister that she was not in trouble. In fact, she was in the least amount of trouble anyone has ever been in the history of the world, simply by coming up and asking for permission to see the puppy. I asked him if we were still going to see it, and he just looked at me and said, "Sorry, son, the puppy ran away." My mom came in just a few minutes, and as we were leaving, there were police cars pulling up. "Are they going to help find the puppy?" my sister asked my mom, but she said, "No, they're here for something else." The other day, after reading through a lot of the stories on here, I remembered this incident and asked my dad about it. Apparently, when the cops searched his car, they found rope, duct tape, a knife, pliers, and a hacksaw. At this guy's apartment, they found a whole shitload of child porn. My dad and sister testified at his trial, and the guy got 20 years, which means, barring other circumstances, he's out now. I also asked my dad if my sister knows about all the stuff in his car. He said no, and it's best to keep it that way. I also wanted to address some of the things brought up here in the comments. It was asked how the police got a warrant to search the guy's car and apartment. One person mentioned that he must have consented, fully aware of the items in his trunk. The thing is, I never said they were in his trunk. When the police looked into his car, from the outside, the rope, duct tape, and hacksaw were in his back seat, and the pliers and knife were in the front seat. It wasn't even a kitchen knife either, it was an 8-inch hunting knife, so there was definitely probable cause there. When I was 19, I worked for a company that allocated labor to rural areas of Australia. Basically, what you did was tell them when you were available, and they'd send you to a remote farm for a few weeks where you'd do whatever they needed done. It was hard work and long hours, but good pay and good fun if you got in with a nice group of workers. When this occurred, I was working on a large property. I was told it covered roughly the same landmass as the state of Maryland, USA, about 9 hours from Sydney City, and the property itself was about 40 minutes from the nearest town. In short, it was in the middle of nowhere. I was working at the farm cleaning bushland with 3 other guys my age from the city. Our boss was a guy called Jeremy, who owned the farm and supervised us while helping out with the work. He was pretty laid back and generally really good to us. This summer in particular was very hot and the work was hard, so one day when the temperature hit about 38 degrees Celsius, that's about 100 degrees Fahrenheit, Jeremy decided to give us the afternoon off. He knew of a water hole on the farm about a 20-minute drive north. I was keen for a swim, but the other guys just wanted to relax for the arvo. So him and I hopped in one of the work trucks and started heading across the property. It was mostly wide, empty expanses with a few clumps of scattered bushland. Jeremy wasn't much of a talker, so we drove more or less in silence. About 20 minutes in, however, he suddenly perked up and jabbed me in the ribs. "Do you see that over there, behind the 2 dead trees?" I should mention here that if you're not familiar with inland areas, particularly those in Australia, they are brown or red, and mostly flat and bland, meaning any bright colors stick out like a sore thumb. So you can imagine our surprise when we could see a large blue angular structure far off in the distance. We steered in its direction, and as we got closer, we realized it was a huge blue shipping container just sitting in the middle of nowhere. Jeremy was perplexed. I asked him if he knew what it was, but he obviously didn't. He said he hadn't seen it when he drove through the same area about 5 weeks before and wanted to go and see what it was. Initially, we pulled to a stop about 100 meters away from it. At this stage, I had a really bad feeling. The whole thing just wasn't right. It's hard to explain. But as you can imagine, seeing such a foreign object in the middle of a huge barren expanse, it had to be something weird. Jeremy, however, wanted to investigate, which I understood, given it was his property, but in truth I was really anxious. As we got closer, things got even more bizarre. There was a big diesel generator thumping away behind it, and a CCTV camera on each side, all motion activated so they buzzed from side to side, following us as we moved around. I tried to reason with Jeremy, something along the lines of, "With all this security, someone obviously doesn't want us here. Let's just go." He brushed me off, however, reminding me that it was his farm, and whoever had put this here was trespassing, so he wanted to go inside. Despite all the surveillance, there was only a small padlock on the huge door. We had some bolt cutters in his toolbox, and after a bit of a struggle, we broke the lock and went inside. The first thing I noticed was the rush of cool air as we got in. The place was air-conditioned, which I must admit was quite pleasant on such a hot day. We searched around for a light switch, but I could already see this was some sort of IT setup, as there were flashing LEDs all around the place and a sort of hum that you hear when a hard drive's working hard. When we finally switched on the lights, we could see a sophisticated, albeit somewhat cluttered, office setup. There were hard disks the size of bar fridges and other computer equipment lining the walls, sometimes piled 2 or 3 high, and plastic storage boxes scattered around the far wall, and several desks with computer monitors arranged in the middle, complete with rolling office chairs. At this stage, I felt like I was in one of those nonsensical dreams. as this made absolutely no sense. We wandered to the middle and sat down at the desks to see if the computers could give us any idea of what the hell was going on here. My heart was racing, and I just wanted to bolt. I mean, we had been seen by the CCTV, so if anyone was monitoring, they already knew we were here. Jeremy, on the other hand, was adamant that we had to get to the bottom of this. So I put on a brave face and started looking through the computer. This went on for a while, but in short, neither of us had a very high grasp of technology outside of Facebook and Microsoft Word. The best I can describe it from my lay position is that it was endless lists of computer talk. It was like that old Napster or LimeWire download screens, just constantly picking up and receiving data, then recording it on several windows. I gave up on the computers and walked cautiously over to the far end of the container to the big piles of storage boxes. By then I was pretty sure no one else was there, as there was nowhere to hide really, but I was still incredibly on edge. I decided, against my better judgment, to see what was inside all these boxes. My brief sift through this box still makes me feel sick to my stomach. It didn't take me long to realize that this box was full of posters, DVDs, and photos, all of hardcore child pornography. One thing that still gets me to this day is that it was all neatly ordered in folders and smaller boxes. These people were really organized. I immediately recoiled, jumped up, and ran over to Jeremy. I could hardly string out a sentence together, so I said something to the effect of, "Mate, get out, child sex, go, get the fuck out of here." I dragged him out, composed myself, and managed to explain what I saw. We jumped back in the truck and sped back to the house. The farm had no mobile phone reception, and we hadn't brought the satellite phone, so we had to go to the landline to call the police. Once we called them, they still had to make it all the way to the farm from the nearest police station, which was in a town about half an hour from the town closest to the farm. As I mentioned, it's very remote. We waited, talking frantically about what we had seen, until the cops arrived almost an hour later. They arrived at 2 four-wheel drives, and we jumped in and led them back. This is where it gets worse. By the time we got back, the container door was open, and there was a fire inside. We had only 2 small extinguishers in the cars, and these did very little. The fire department took another hour to get there, by which stage most of the damage was already done. An arson report by the federal police found almost no evidence of the computer equipment described, and only traces of paper and cardboard. This means that whoever ran it knew that we were there and had time to come and remove most of it and get away. There were various ways to get off the property, and the land mass was huge, so there was no real way to tail them. Since the police hadn't taken us too seriously in the first instance due to poor explanation on the phone, aerial surveillance was also impossible by the time we had pieced it all together. I took a keen interest in following it up, but with no real evidence of who might be responsible, the investigation went cold. I've kept in contact with Jeremy, and the shipping container is still sitting there on the farm as it's too expensive to move. I'll never forget what I saw in those boxes, though.